Despite knowing about the health risks surrounding nicotine, Juul has intentionally and systematically used marketing techniques made famous by Big Tobacco decades ago to spawn teen addicts hooked on nicotine.
In this subject matter, not only talking to youth, but parents, very active in schools and really trying to spread the word about the dangers of vaping and other substances. And your organization, LEAD, out of Lake Forest, is really a leader not only in Lake County, but around the country. And Andy, I really appreciate your time here tonight and look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Mike. Happy to be here.
We also have some special guests that are going to be joining us a little bit into the material, but let's just get started. So again, we're here to talk about vaping and the impact that that's had on our community. And some may be wondering why a state's attorney would be concerned about vaping, especially as it relates to youth. And I really come at this from two different perspectives. One, as a father of teenagers, and also as the state's attorney, because it's my job to keep the people of Lake County safe, and particularly our youth. And when I look at the conduct of some of the corporations that are behind this, it's troubling to me, which is why we decided to take action. What really got me thinking about this several years ago is when you look at the progress that we've made as a society to take on tobacco and specifically smoking with young people. And because of a lot of legislation, a lot of advocacy, a lot of prevention and education work that's been done throughout the country, we've seen huge declines in the use of tobacco and cigarettes, specifically by young people. When we look at our Illinois Youth Survey data, for example, just here in Lake County, some numbers are pretty staggering. From 2014 to 2018, when it comes to 8th graders, there was a 300% decline in the reported use of cigarettes. 10th graders, 100% decline in that time period, and a 71% decline for 12th graders. So when you look at the percentage of young people that admitted to using cigarettes in the past 30 days on that survey, which is shown to be very accurate historically, and by 2018, just 1% of 8th graders reported using cigarettes, 3% of 10th graders, and 7% of 12th graders. So those are some pretty great strides that I think all of us as a society would be happy about and are happy about. But there's one group that certainly doesn't like those numbers, and that's big tobacco, because they know that in order to keep making profits off of people's misery, that they have to get young people addicted to their product. And certainly when you look at, if you're them and you're seeing huge declines in young people using cigarettes and becoming addicted to nicotine, my opinion is, well, we all saw that as a great thing. These big tobacco companies saw that as a threat to their business and some opportunity. And because of that, they created these things. This is a Juul vape pen that we purchased when we filed our lawsuit last year. This is a device, if you haven't seen one, it's pretty slick. It looks like a thumb drive or a USB device. This is the cartridge that contains the flavored nicotine, and we'll get into a little bit more of this later. But this little cartridge contains over a pack of cigarettes worth of nicotine, which is the third most addictive chemical on the planet. And young people are ingesting massive amounts of this drug, and they don't even know it, along with other harmful chemicals. So, when you look at the device itself, and we're going to get into that, we're going to get into the flavors, these flavors that are clearly designed to attract young people, flavors like citrus burst, blueberry, pina colada, here's pink lemonade. These are clearly not designed to attract adults. These are clearly designed to attract young people. And again, in a way that they can consume a product that's highly addictive, with sometimes right under the noses of teachers or school administrators or their own parents. With cigarettes, traditional cigarettes, if young people smoke, if they're in their bedroom smoking, their parents can smell it. They can smell it on their kids. If they're in school, certainly it can be detected. But I've talked to a lot of school superintendents, a lot of administrators, a lot of teachers in schools throughout Lake County, and back when school was in session, this was reported as really a huge concern of theirs. Kids were smoking or vaping in class, vaping in the bathrooms in schools, and it's very difficult for them to be detected. So again, in my opinion, this was a coordinated effort, really taking the playbook from Big Tobacco when you look at the advertising campaigns and the product placement that they've used to lure young people to try this product, and it's very troubling to me. So I know I'm preaching to the choir with you two, but what I'd like to do before we get into some discussion with Andy about your prevention work, I'd like to talk to Dr. Sirota. If you could kind of elaborate about some of the things you see in your practice in terms of the harmfulness of these products, and again, kind of elaborate on what they do to young people.
Yeah, so, what I would first like to do is say there's so much attention, and rightfully so right now, turned toward the COVID-19 pandemic. But with all of that, I think we cannot lose sight of this ongoing youth vaping epidemic. And e-cigarettes continue to rapidly produce a new generation of addicted teens, addicted to nicotine. And, it's important, I think, to point out that 99% of e-cigarette products that are still sold, so retail establishments, contain nicotine. And even with rising rates of COVID-19 among teens, we've seen that in Lake County more recently, vaping still continues to be one of the greatest public health crises facing teens. So I think, we really have to give perspective to this. And I think it helps to think about what this looks like in numbers. And you've mentioned some of it locally. It's certainly a local problem, but this is a national issue. And we have 6 million U.S. high school and middle school age teens who are currently tobacco users. So despite what you described correctly about reduction in cigarette use, combustible cigarette use, we have 6 million tobacco users. Most of those are e-cigarette users. And what does 6 million mean in numbers? That's a combination. That would be like taking the entire population of Los Angeles and Chicago and putting them together. Two of the largest cities in our country. And so what this looked like across the country was that by the end of 2019, which is the most recent data we have, 1 in every 3 high schoolers and 1 in every 9 middle schoolers were using e-cigarettes. And that's over the past 30 days. And as you said, past 30 days is a really good prediction of someone who's regularly using something versus having just tried something. And these rates have really even more than doubled over the last 2 years. But the problem probably goes all the way back to 2011. And if we look at those last 9 years, what we saw was an increase of more than 1,800%. I'm not sure that that's ever happened with anything in a public health sense. And that entirely coincided, as you mentioned, with the introduction of Juul. Even over a 2-year period between 2013 and 15, we saw something like a quadrupling of use. So this is something that is really pervasive, I think, in the pediatric population. And we really have to think about it because we are seeing it in our high schoolers and our middle schoolers. And just like these use rates are going up, the frequency of use is going up too. So it's not just that someone's trying it or they're using it, but even by the end of 2019, we know that 1 in 3 high schoolers who were users of e-cigarettes were using them more than 20 days a month, so nearly daily. And it was about 1 in 5 middle schoolers, e-cigarette users, who were using them nearly daily. And that's from the National Youth Tobacco Survey. But if you look at Monitoring the Future, which is also a very good national data set, we've got 1 in every 8 12th graders across our country vaping daily. And so how do we get here? Absolutely, you said it. Flavors played a dramatic role in addicting teens. And, 97, 98% of teen users of e-cigarette products use flavored products. That's all about the use. So fruit flavors, dessert flavors, those were removed. Once those were removed, mint flavors, menthol have just become the most popular. It's interesting, Juul has, like at the end of their ads they used to run on BBM locally, they'd say, and it's an old playbook trick, like switch, don't quit. And this is exactly what teens have done with their vaping devices. They've either switched to the disposable devices, which, there's a little loophole there. So those are still readily available to them when some of the flavor bans came about because they didn't apply to the disposable devices. The kids have just switched from whatever fruit or dessert flavor was most popular to mint or menthol. And these flavors were basically designed to addict youth, to appeal to youth, to disguise the harsh taste of tobacco. And then if you pick a product like Juul, you've got such a high dose of nicotine because they developed these salt-based nicotine products that you can use that flavor, that very strong flavor, to disguise what would otherwise be a harsh, unappealing taste of the nicotine or tobacco. So let's just take a look at some of the harms. And I will tell you that if you take care of teenagers and you ask about these things, you will see most of them at some time in practice if you do my job. And, most of us know who Robert Redfield is lately because he's the director of the CDC and he's in the news related to COVID-19. But before COVID-19, one of the things that he came up with was, and I'm going to just pop my screen here for a second, but he said something like this. He said, look, youth use of any tobacco product, including e-cigarettes, is unsafe. And it was really incumbent upon all of us who are concerned with public health or health to do something about it. So what are these risks? So the risks start out with this sense of, or this myth of harmlessness, this idea that's been promoted by advertising of e-cigarettes that they're harmless. There's this misperception. Many teens early on and continue to think that they're vaping something that's only flavor. They don't realize that there's nicotine in it. They don't realize that they're becoming addicted. And the teen brain is uniquely susceptible to addiction. So what we see is teens are really easy targets. Sort of the prefrontal and the last to develop part of the brain is the part of the brain that also becomes diseased in addiction. And what we see, oops, I've got some photos kind of disrupting my screen here, but what we see is that that part of the brain, as it gets exposed to nicotine or any addictive chemical, that the brain then is very easily susceptible to addiction. So teen years become the absolute worst time to introduce any addictive substance. In fact, the risk of addiction is something like 3 to 5 times greater if nicotine is introduced in the teen years. And nicotine has this ability to kind of prime the brain so that the brain can become susceptible to other addictions. So that's something I absolutely see in my practice where we have middle schoolers who are starting, perhaps it's something social, they don't own their own device, but they may have like an older teen friend, sibling, friend of a sibling's, be at a party where they're introduced. And very quickly, those young teens can go from sharing someone else's Juul to becoming hooked or addicted themselves. There's certainly not the only harm as far as that. We have to think about like what's in the vapor and this idea that what we are sort of inhaling and exhaling is just this pure water vapor coming out. That's not the case at all with these cigarettes. There are a lot of toxins in that vape cloud. So number one, there's nicotine, which is an addictive chemical. We have toxic heavy metals, not just in the vapor itself, but they come from the coils that are in the devices that contribute to heating of the e-juice. And then there are flavorings, and the flavorings themselves have been linked to lung disease. There are nearly a dozen known cancer-causing chemicals that come out in vape clouds, and there are several what are called volatile organic compounds. These are just dangerous chemicals, many of which are on the FDA's list of harmful chemicals. So this is not water vapor. This is really harmful chemical, and because it's an aerosol, we have these chemicals that are left behind in our environment. They can be ingested, they can be inhaled, or they can be absorbed through skin. So we've got, teens susceptible, we've got these dangerous chemicals, and then what else happens? Nicotine gets into the brain. It can interfere with attention, learning, and mood. We see some of that in our patients in my practice. We don't always necessarily realize initially that it's related to nicotine, but it can be. We have these harmful chemicals that I talked about, and they can be disruptive to the heart, to blood vessels. They affect blood pressure and heart rate. We're learning more about that. We know that teens who vape nicotine are more likely to use combustible cigarettes. So vaping is really this on-ramp for cigarettes. So it may start as, just juuling or vaping or using a stig or a puff bar because they like the flavor. And next thing you know, this teen is moving on to using cigarettes. They're certainly cheaper than some of these vaping devices for many teens. And then of course, it's also an on-ramp for marijuana use and vaping marijuana in some of the most dangerous concentrations. So two other things that I want to point out before we move on to a little bit about vaping lung disease, and that is some of the injuries that are related. So we talk a lot about becoming addicted, nicotine, moving on to cigarettes, moving on to marijuana use, and perhaps addiction, because it's also highly addictive for a teen brain. But we have poisonings, and people don't always think about the fact that e-juice itself is very poisonous. And although those pods are designed to be disposable, any teen will tell you they're refillable, and they can refill them with things, including marijuana oils. But young children who smell that flavor, because it's designed to appeal to children, can ingest e-juice. And we know that just a teaspoon, 5 mLs of any e-juice, is enough to basically be fatal for any child in the toddler years. So these are really dangerous chemicals from a poisoning perspective. And actually in 2013, there were about 1,500 cases of e-juice poisoning reported to the Poison Center. And by 2019, and this is from December, there were over 5,000. So there was a little bit of a dip when there was some child-resistant packaging, and just climbed right back up with the popularity and use of these things. So that's one of the very serious risks as far as injury and emergency harms, which I see in my practice, and I see that primarily in younger children whose parents are vaping. So younger parents who have gotten into vaping. And then I have not seen this personally, but certainly there are stories abound, and that relates to these batteries essentially exploding. So these lithium ion batteries, these chemicals can be of questionable quality or just sort of unstable, and it can explode and cause really serious burns and harm to those who are using them. So I think most people, and this was in the news starting, a year ago, basically last August and through the fall, what's now become named by the CDC is EVALI, which is, people think of it as this vaping lung disease, but it stands for e-cigarette or vaping use-associated lung injury. And the most recent data, if you go to the CDC site, the most recent data comes from February. So COVID has really gotten in the way of us thinking about what a serious health issue this is as well. So if we look back to the middle of February, there was a total of 2,807 hospitalized e-cigarette or vaping product use lung injury cases, and deaths were reported to the CDC from all 50 states as well as some of the US territories. So this was like a very, very pervasive problem. It's just been overshadowed by what's happening with the COVID-19 pandemic. And interestingly, when we look at these numbers, the CDC is now only reporting EVALI cases that lead to hospitalization, and then deaths regardless of hospitalization. So there's probably very likely an underreporting of how much of this is going on. So if someone is sick and they don't end up hospitalized, we won't know that they're experiencing a lung disease related to vaping if we focus on these statistics. This is a condition that primarily affects males. About 2/3 of the cases have been in males. There's a wide age range, but the median age range is 24, so it's early 20s. But we've seen this in young teens as young as 13 years of age. And well over 50% of the cases are between about 18 and 24 years of age. So sort of that early use where it's, moved on or kind of bumped into that range of addiction. It's not entirely clear what is causing this lung disease, but there are a few things that have been implicated. First of all, vitamin E acetate seems to have shown up in a lot of the samples that have been analyzed by the CDC. And without a doubt, this is also a THC vaping lung disease. It's not exclusively a nicotine vaping lung disease. And I think it's very important to point that out because we know that vaping nicotine is an on-ramp to vaping marijuana or vaping THC, and just the sort of toxicity of these chemicals in the lungs. So these products don't just come from, when we talk about this lung disease and the analysis the CDC did, these products do not just come from the black market or informal sources, as the CDC refers to them. It's very important to point out that these were products that were sold legally in retail establishments, as well as THC products that were sold legally in states where it is legal in dispensaries. So I think teens are also, I wanted to point out, like, this can be a very gloomy and doomy time and a gloomy subject, but I wanted to point out that teens are even starting to figure out that this is dangerous. And I see that in my own practice. I have college age patients who come to me and they say, like, I'm hooked on this and I want to quit. What can we do about it? It's dumb. I'm wasting so much money. I'm getting sick. I'm coughing every morning. I have wheezing now. I never wheezed my entire childhood. And even this week in JAMA Pediatrics, there was a study that was published and it showed that nearly half of teens who vape currently are actually interested in quitting. And this was a large sample. They looked at about 15,000 teens or young people who were vapers. They were between 12 and 17 years of age. And so I think, this is getting out, but unfortunately, when we go to treat these teens and young adults, we don't have any proven treatment for addiction to nicotine via vaping. And so we use a nicotine replacement therapy, which is not approved, by the way, for use under 18 years of age, but we use it anyway because we don't have alternative options, but we have no information about whether this is going to be effective. So it really just shows you the advantage, right, that the industry has taken of teens. So I think we could probably wrap up with.
Yeah, well, look, I think certainly, and I appreciate you highlighting kind of the number one, the addictive nature of nicotine and the other chemicals that are in these products, because I spend a lot of time talking to young people, middle schoolers specifically, about vaping. And, I read a study once, for example, that said 2/3 of high schoolers didn't know that there was nicotine in these Juul devices. And even the ones that do, I think, because as you indicated with brain development, there's maybe a thought process that, well, I'll just try it. I can vape for a couple of years and I can quit. So they really have no idea how addictive nicotine is. And then furthermore, as you pointed out, there's this perception that, okay, well, maybe it has nicotine, but it's really not harmful. It's much more or much less harmful than cigarettes. It's called juice, which it connotates, something healthy. And, certainly when you talk about the carcinogens and all the lung irritants that are in these products, that's something that most young people and most adults, frankly, have no idea, because these aren't labeled on these products. The FDA has not required that yet. So, you pick up a box now, it'll say it contains nicotine, but all these harmful products, these carcinogens that you mentioned, they're not labeled. So people don't know. And I agree, this was really a targeted marketing campaign to young people to get them addicted to these products, which unfortunately we've seen. I want to switch over to Andy Duran and get Andy in on the conversation, because I know I see you nodding just like me as Dr. Sirota is talking, because again, we've presented together before, but I know this is a topic that's important to all of us. Andy, I know you're a parent in the community as well, and you've helped educate, as I said at the start, both parents and teenagers. So talk about why you got involved in this and some of your efforts to get the word out about this.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. And thanks, Dr. Sirota, for those great comments. I always love listening to you. So Yes, I'm a parent and I run a drug prevention organization. So what was really striking to me is that about 4 or 5 years ago, really before we even really knew anything about Juuls, we started to try to do presentations on e-cigarettes, and no one would show up because it wasn't an issue, right? And when you try to get out ahead of an issue, you know, you're better able to prevent, you know, negative or harmful things from occurring. But unfortunately, it hadn't really impacted people yet, so we weren't really drawing a crowd. And then it happened so quickly. I mean, here's the reality: students are vaping, but a better story is that not every student is doing it. Education has some impact, but a better story is that, you know, a comprehensive approach is necessary. And it's one reason I love to work with Mike and why he needs to be state's attorney again and again and again, because he has such a forward-thinking view of justice and of really, primary prevention, preventing just negative things from occurring in our community, right? And being passionate about that, and we share that same passion. When I think about what it was that really made us want to focus on this, obviously it was a significant community issue, and we exist to try to help solve those issues that are going on with young people. I also felt a sense of just injustice about it. You know, you think about why do we see Altria, for example, you know, the parent company of Marlboro, invest billions of dollars in Juul? It's pretty easy because, as Mike said, cigarette use had gone significantly down, and they're worried about their market share. And when they buy into or invest into a vape company, they don't have the same regulations. Think about, you know, when I was a kid, I remember getting Sports Illustrated for Kids magazine, and on the flip side of the perforated sports cards that were there was Joe Camel every month. I still have some of those issues. Obviously can't do that anymore for cigarettes, right? I remember there being flavored cigarettes. My grandmother, and she might have gotten a bootleg after they were no longer available, but she had wild cherry and chocolate flavored cigarettes, right? Which shocking that, you know, our young people today don't know that those used to exist, right? So we got smart as a country and said no more of that. So couple that with the fact that you can't really advertise the market for cigarettes the way that you can for e-cigarettes, because, you know, the loopholes that exist in our federal and state legislations makes it really easy to understand why they would, you know, want to invest in such a company and why it took off as quickly as it did. So the question is, why do kids do it? You know, why do students do it? Well, number one, they think everybody else is doing it. I'm here to tell you that's not true. When you look at our countywide data, the majority are still not vaping. And I know it doesn't seem like that. When we talk to young people, we're very clear that we say that. However, we make mistakes as adults and community leaders and educators because we say things like this. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been on a stage in a school doing an assembly, and the dean or the principal, very well intended, will come up and say, I got Andy Duran here from LEAD. He's here to talk to you today because all you guys are vaping, and he's going to help you to stop. Well, think about the normalizing message that is to young people. We're telling them that all you guys are doing it, and that what he says is going to get you to stop. Well, that puts me in a bad position. But more important than that is that it's not true. Not every student is doing it. So you got students in that room who are not vaping, and they're all of a sudden thinking, shoot, I'm on the outside. I need to get involved with this, right? And then you got students on the inside that are vaping, and that decision is being affirmed, right? So we have to watch our language as parents, as community leaders, as adults, et cetera. Why else do kids do it? It tastes good, right? It gives a little buzz, it tastes good, and they've been conditioned to believe that it's not harmful. They've been conditioned to believe that it's safer than cigarettes, safer than alcohol, safer than whatever that next drug might be. They've been led to believe that the chemicals have been approved by the FDA. Dr. Sirota mentioned on some of this, aside from the nicotine and the metals and the alkalines and things that are in there, you have FDA approved products like propylene glycol, like vegetable glycerin, right? These are used in the flavorings. And the companies have actually said things like, you know, our products have been approved by our chemicals have been approved by the FDA. Well, it's technically true. You know, VG and PG, vegetable glycerin and propylene glycol, have been approved by the FDA, but certainly not for inhalation, right? They've been approved for ingestion to be used in flavoring and food additives and things like that. But young people, we need to help them take their thought process to the next level, right? So, and they oftentimes, but both Mike and Susan said, you know, don't understand that there's actually nicotine sometimes in there. Now, some students that are using do, but the majority thought, oh, I'm just vaping flavored water. We hear that all the time. And we know that 98.5% Every product in the United States market contains nicotine. That's why people buy it, right? Because they want the nicotine. But even in that, 1 to 1.5% of products that don't have nicotine, there's still those harmful flavors. I've actually, I'm a bit of an experimenter. I like technology. I like science. So I've actually taken like a Juul, like Mike had in his hand, and some other devices we have, and I've tried to empty them out and just put water in them just to see what happens. And it flat doesn't work, right? So it's never just flavored water. There's always got to be some other kind of thickening element that's in there that's not intended for inhalation. So I think it's important that our young people know that. And a lot of students, like I said before, it's the barriers that existed for cigarette smoking don't exist for vaping. So that they've been conditioned, young people have been conditioned to think that smoking is dirty, bad, cancer causing, and leaves garbage around, smells, can turn your teeth yellow, et cetera. Vaping is clean and tastes good and doesn't leave any residue, and you can do it in your room without your parents knowing, right? So they've been conditioned to believe this, and so our job is to reverse that conditioning. I think the other important thing to know is that we've found a bit of a nicotine's arms race, and I think Mike in his lawsuit did a really good job. It's been a few months since I've read it, but did a really good job in that lawsuit kind of pointing this out and saying that over the course of time, Juul made certain claims about their nicotine concentration that just were flatly wrong. They were measuring the nicotine concentration differently than they had done in the past, weight versus volume. So the fact that, our Surgeon General, Jerome Adams, has said, that the amount of liquid nicotine in these products can promote dependence in just a few uses. And that's what we've seen happen, where, young people set out just to try it a couple times at a party, maybe doing it on a Saturday night, not doing it again until a couple more Saturdays. And all of a sudden, based on, what's happening physiologically and psychologically, is that it starts to work. The nicotine, it starts to work. And the occurrences between use start to shrink. And now students who never really wanted to have to be vaping during the school day and at school are now having to do that because of the symptoms that exist when they don't do it. So I think that's really important to know. So if you're a parent, and a couple things that are important to know and to talk to your kids about. 90% of addiction starts in adolescence. I'm not a scientist or brain person or a doctor, so I can only tell you what I've read. Dr. Short will be able to go much deeper than I can on this, but what I understand about young people, and I've spent my whole career working with youth, is that because the prefrontal cortex doesn't develop until age 25, that students oftentimes will rely on using the limbic system for decision making instead of that prefrontal cortex. So the limbic system is oftentimes what causes pleasure seeking. So there's more pleasure seeking in adolescence than there is, and the nicotine works in a way that it does condition you to be addicted to other drugs. Important to send the message that safer does not mean safe. And we actually don't know if this is safer than anything else. One of the common things you hear, or you've heard these companies say in the past, is that our products, unlike cigarettes, unlike big tobacco, have never been proven to cause cancer. Think about the language they use intentionally there. Products have never been proven to cause cancer. That's technically true, right? They haven't been around long enough to conclusively identify that. It takes 15 to 20 years to determine if there's enough research to determine if a product in and of itself causes cancer. E-cigarettes have not been around that long. I think the first e-cigarette sold in a retail store was something like 2008, and Juul's didn't even come around until the end of 2015. So we're not even close. So they can technically get away with saying our products have never been proven to cause cancer. But we think about the elements and we think about what's inside there, the cancer-causing agents that we know exist, then we can be safe to assume that that's probably going to follow the same thing. So we just have to make sure we help, again, our young people take that thought process to the next level. If this is what the companies are telling you, products have been approved by the FDA and it doesn't cause cancer, think about why they're saying it that way. Because they know that the flavors are going to stop at some point. They know they're not going to be able to advertise and market for very long. Some of them are already starting to have issues with their business. So I think it's important that we make sure that we let students know, and more importantly, that most teens don't do it, and that we have started to see some reductions in Lake County communities.
Well, that's a great point, and I do want to get back to that marketing, and I know we've had some pictures that have popped up that we've actually used in our lawsuit that kind of compare and contrast Big Tobacco's old playbook with the current playbook, which is exactly the same. We're talking about themes like social inclusion, popularity, the use of attractive models and things like that, bright colors and all this, again, clearly designed to get young people to try the product. And then they hope they will become addicted. And we know addiction is a disease. It's a tough disease to fight, and nobody wants to become addicted. I want to acknowledge and welcome our special guests that have joined us. Polly and Adam, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great to see you both. Polly and Adam are a local family, and Adam, when I met you for the first time, you looked a lot different than you do now. You were in a hospital bed on a ventilator,
Yeah.
and you were in pretty rough shape. And I know you've had the courage to tell your story on international news, not just nationally, but internationally. I know you've helped me. You've been to schools and helped talk to young people about telling them your story to help hopefully educate and keep kids from going down that path in the first place. But so I thank you for that. I thank you for your courage and being willing to tell your story. And I wonder if you might be willing to do it again here tonight and kind of tell folks what you've experienced.
Of course, yeah. So the incident happened just about a year ago, in late August of 2019. So I was in the hospital for about a week, and so about there in a week, and then a ventilator for about 5 to 6 days. And when I initially got there, I was on 85% oxygen. So they were pumping oxygen, because I could not breathe on my own. And that was the true horror for me, is that just how quick that was, because from the night that I was admitted, I was breathing fine, and then I had to be put on a ventilator. But to get where, how I started, I was about 16, 17. I was when I was in high school, and from what I could tell, there was a lot of people in high school that were already using the e-cigarettes. So, trying to fit into high school, I mistakenly first tried the Juul, and without knowing anything about nicotine, anything about e-cigarettes in general, I tried it, and the high amounts of nicotine and just the flavors in general got me hooked. I tried the mango one the first time, and it honestly tasted exactly like a mango. I couldn't taste anything differently. It like I said, it marketed as safe, so that's what I believed, and I just did not do my research into the possible harms on it. And yeah, they didn't market, they didn't put on the packaging as well how much nicotine was on there. And when they did, they kind of just confused the marketers a little bit, because they didn't advertise it correctly. There was much more nicotine in there than, I don't know, than just I understood. As well, like the flavoring, the mango, the mint, as well as the cucumber. Those fortunately have been gone for a while now, but those were the 3 main flavors that I was using. And there were other flavors such as tobacco and I think tobacco, and then some other menthol. And I never got into that because it wasn't fruity and it just didn't taste good. But when you think about a cucumber and a mint and mango, it gives you a good sensation. And as well as talking about the addiction, I didn't really realize I was addicted until it was already too late. I would reach for it first thing in the morning, and I just did not really see that as a problem. But obviously now I do know that it is a problem. But I just really hope that my message and my story can help some families or some other students or kids that are thinking about it. My finishing statement would just be, just to do research or take time to think, because I didn't. And, unfortunately, my life has forever changed because of that, because my lungs will never be the same. They unfortunately are still damaged to this day. I'm still working to recovery, but yeah, so if these people's facts didn't get to you, then I hope my personal story did.
Well, again, I appreciate you telling your story again. I know you've had a lot of courage throughout this and told it a bunch of times, and you've helped a lot of kids undoubtedly, because it's important for young people to hear it from other young people.
Right.
I mean, they can hear it from adults all day long, but when they hear your story, they see themselves in you. And here you're a young, I think you were a wrestler, right? So
City wrestler. Yeah.
so you're young, super healthy, and how long did you vape before you had the incident in the hospital?
It was about 3 years, maybe a little bit less, but I was doing it for a while, and then I was also, during the wrestling season and during certain, certain things, activities that cause or that use more endurance. I could just tell that I wasn't the same. I was using more energy, and I would get tired quickly, but just the nicotine was still bad. This was me in the hospital. That's
Yeah,
and you can see how big the tube is. Usually it's just a small one, but those are 85%. And
that's what you look like when I first met you. You look a lot better today. And
yeah, thank you.
again, I can't say it enough. You're really helping people, and people need to hear your message. So please keep it up.
Will do.
Polly, as a parent, talk to us about kind of what you went through and are still going through as you see a picture like that of your son on a ventilator. That's gut wrenching. Talk to us about the parent's perspective of somebody that's lived through this.
Well, I knew that Adam was vaping. I found something in his room shortly after he had started. I had no idea what it was. I asked him. He probably told me something that wasn't the truth, and I probably believed it because I didn't know what it was. Eventually, I found out what a Juul was and put 2 and 2 together and realized that was it. So anytime I would find it in his room, if I find a pod in his room, anything that would have to do with the Juul itself, even if it was just the box, I would throw it away. I would immediately take it somewhere else, like a different parking lot, garbage can, and I would throw it away so he couldn't get to it. But that didn't stop Adam. He would continue to do it. He would tell me, okay, I'm going to stop. But then he would go out and he would buy it again, and it would just be this vicious cycle. And I would find stuff in his room and I'd throw it away, and then he'd go get it again. And that stuff is not cheap. The Juul itself is not too expensive, but those pods are extremely expensive. And being a parent, I had a father that died from smoking. That's very near and dear to my heart. And, keeping healthy lungs is important to me. So I, would tell him, that it was wrong and it wasn't good for him and it was going to affect him, later on the line. But like you said, a parent can talk until they're purple in the face. And until they believe it themselves, or someone like Adam tells his story and someone says, wow, that's just like me. I do grab for it first thing in the morning, or, when I'm running, I do get winded pretty easily, or going up the stairs. Going up the stairs, my son would get winded. So hopefully that will be the message. I'm not quiet. I've always said we're airing our dirty laundry to save another family. I don't care what people think about us or our parenting skills or anything. I will continue to tell Adam's story because it will save somebody else's life. And I think it has. After Adam was in the hospital, I immediately put his picture and videos of him gasping for air. I put it online, and a lot of people showed it to their kids. People were texting Adam and sending me Facebook messages saying, my son saw your son's video and he immediately threw his Juul away. And so hopefully we can keep it up in the limelight. I know that COVID is a very deadly disease. I know it's an important thing to talk about right now, but we can't stop talking about the Juul as well, because we need to get that product off the market.
Absolutely. And you're right. It's really interesting how COVID has impacted so many different things. And Dr. Sirota hit on it very well early on about how, a year ago today, this was in the news just about every day. It was a huge subject matter all over the place. Everybody was talking about it, and it does seem to have kind of died down a little bit. And I think largely a lot of that is certainly due to COVID. As Dr. Sirota pointed out, we have a lot of cases that are being underreported, or people aren't going to the hospital because of COVID. And we don't have kids in school. And a huge group of people that I would hear from are teachers and school administrators, because this was impacting the learning environment. And with kids not in school, that's not being seen as much, but it's certainly still happening. So that's why it's as important now as ever to make sure we're continuing to have this discussion. So I can't thank you both enough. I know it's not easy to share personal stories, but you really are helping people, and it means a lot. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Andy, you, as somebody that's talked to a lot of parents, that's done a lot of, I've seen you present to parents in communities across Lake County. What's the main message you'd want parents to know about this?
So the main message is to express your disapproval, because research shows, local research, state and countrywide research, nationwide research shows that students, teens specifically, who believe that their parents disapprove of any substance use, regardless of the substance, be it alcohol, tobacco, vaping, marijuana, et cetera, are 55% less likely to engage in that behavior. So number one, express your disapproval. Now, that's not to say that many parents do that and their son or daughter still might vape or use substance, right? Number two, and it sounds exactly like what Polly talked about, is great. Acknowledge that if it's occurring, take action steps to do something about it. But even then, sometimes it doesn't work. So I think not to use scare tactics, talk about what can happen, talk about what does actually happen rather than what can happen, focusing on the fact that it's addictive and that you're getting half truths, and that there's nicotine and all those things. And I think the key about young people to remember, and I have to keep this in mind as a parent, I fail all the time, but is that young people are much more willing to move towards something than away from something. So much more willing to focus on the positive reasons for non-use than the negative reasons for, that happen with use. So I think that's a key message as we're framing our conversation with our own kids.
Polly, thank you, Andy. And Polly, I just wanted to let you know, as you were talking, we were receiving tons of people that were writing in thanking you for sharing your story. So a lot of positive feedback from those out there. So again, thank you. I know we all appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Before we brought Polly and Adam in, we were kind of talking a little bit about the marketing tactics of Juul, and certainly the advertising, and when you compare the old playbook of Big Tobacco with the ads that they've used, and you put those right next to Juul ads, it's strikingly similar. In fact, our research has shown that they've used exactly the same marketing firms to promote their product. But one of the things Juul in particular has been really masterful at, and we've alleged this, and this is all in our lawsuit, which if anybody is interested in reading the lawsuit, it's on the website. It's on my website for the Lake County State's Attorney's Office. You can read through it. There's some great information in there. And if you're upset now as you are hearing about this, you'll be even more upset when you read through the lawsuit and see the images. One of the things that they're masterful at is the use of social media. And certainly when it comes to print media and other forms of media, they're there. But when it comes to social media, they have an incredible campaign that is clearly targeted at youth. We look at what they've done with social media influencers, who are typically young people that have a lot of social media followers. And we've alleged in a lawsuit that they will find young social media influencers that have huge followings, pay them money to take a picture of themselves using a Juul, and put that on their own social media page, which is being followed by other young people. There's and I think we'll pull it. There's one right there. This young person has 70,000 young people following her page. Now, those are probably 12, 13-year-old girls. Here's Katy Perry. Katy Perry has 107 million Instagram followers. They know that. They saw her and Orlando Bloom using their product. They tagged that and then sent it out to all of the people that are following Katy Perry. And who do you think's following Katy Perry on social media? I would imagine probably a lot of young teenagers that are very easily influenced And when they see that, they're more likely to try the product. So this is a very clear campaign that they've undertaken that's been targeted at our young people, and that it's inexcusable, and that's why I took the action to file a lawsuit on behalf of Lake County and in the state of Illinois, frankly, with regard to their conduct, because I know everybody on this call and people that are listening in, any parent out there, any teacher, this is upsetting. I mean, this is clearly big corporations that are trying to get young people addicted to a product so they can make money, and we can't let that happen. So we're getting close to the time here, and before we end, I want to kind of go through and see if anybody has any final thoughts. Dr. Sirota, I know I cut you off a little bit before we went over to Andy, and the great thing about you and Andy is you could each probably talk for 2 hours on this and keep everybody engaged. But any kind of final thoughts you want to make sure you get out there before we end?
For sure. I mean, one of the things that I always want to remind people is that our youth, teens, my patients, they are the victims here. They are absolutely the victims of big tobacco. And there is no doubt that there's an understanding that nicotine's addictive, that teens are susceptible. This is not, teens being bad kids. They're doing what we know teens do, and they were absolutely victimized by big tobacco. You mentioned the social media influencers. There are college scholarships. You can go online now and Google vaping college scholarship, and there are a number of scholarships, many of them $5,000 or more, which is a lot more than local scholarships. But I think, it's just this industry that preys on our youth. And I think we have this is the beast, and we all have this responsibility to cage this beast and figure out how to do it. So that's why I am so appreciative of the things that you have done. Because people will say to me, like, what's the best way to prevent this? I'm asked that as a pediatrician. And my answer is always the same. It's that we need to keep kids from ever trying e-cigarettes. They're so addictive. We need to keep them. And we can't do that without laws that do the kind of things that was done with combustible cigarettes. That took 50 years, and e-cigarettes alone have already undone decades of tobacco control when it comes to youth. So, I think we have to focus on the kind of things you're focusing on and keep in mind that the teens are the victims.
Absolutely. And, I'm glad you brought up too about how you're seeing in your practice and your patients and young people that you talk to, that they're starting to wise up to this. And, I've noticed that too when I speak to classes back when school was in session. But when you sort of lay the case out for even 6th and 7th graders, you kind of lay this out, they get mad. Once they find out that they're really being preyed upon and taken advantage of, they get upset. So it's just, you're 100% right. We got to make sure that there's no blame game when it comes to young people. They are the victims here. They've been targeted, and we need to protect them. And we also need to make sure we're giving them the information so they can make the best choices they can.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for being on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Andy, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I've got 2 quick action steps for everybody watching live or watching later on. Number 1, just have a conversation with your kids about vaping, alcohol, marijuana. There's a lot of things that they're exposed to right now, and a huge protective factor is to make sure that they understand what you think about it. And so number 1 is talk to your kids. Number 2 is vote Mike Nerheim for state's attorney. Yeah, we need people like Mike in office in more places than just the state's attorney's office, frankly. People that are great at what they do, people that really have a care and concern for the people and they serve in their constituency, and people that are just great human beings, which Mike is. Which unfortunately can't say about other politicians always. So I think it would be a horrible thing for our county, for our justice system, if he was not in that position. So number 1, talk to your kids. Number 2, vote Mike Nerheim for state's attorney.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you for that. And I certainly appreciate that. And more importantly, thanks for all you do, for being on here tonight, for spending your evening. I know you've got a family at home. So thanks for being here, and really all you've done. You're out there. So are you, Dr. Sirota, and Polly and Adam. You guys are all out there spreading the word and trying to educate people and trying to help people. And I see it because oftentimes I'm with you at these presentations. So I just want to thank you, and thanks for coming on tonight.
You're welcome.
You bet.
All right, Adam, you're the star of the show, so you get the final word. Whatever you want to say, you can close us out.
All right. Well, like I said, after finishing what I was saying before, so for any kids that are watching, honestly, just take that first step and just educate yourself, and just look in the long run. Say, honestly, research and then put that to yourself. Would you want to be in the same situation I was? If the answer is no, which I hope it is, there it is. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Well said. And again, thanks for having the courage to come on and tell your story. I know you're helping people.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
All right. Well, I think we moderated this pretty well. We actually used the whole hour and we didn't go over, which is rare, but that brings us to just about 8 o'clock. So I want to thank everybody once again for their time. All our presenters that were on tonight, these are wonderful people that truly care about our community, and I think it's pretty obvious from what everybody's seen. I want to thank everybody that took the time to log on and listen to the event. These are strange times and there's different ways of reaching people, but we want to make sure that we're keeping these conversations going. And as we discussed, conversations, whether it's the opioid epidemic or teen vaping or so many other issues, we've got to make sure that even in these crazy times that we're living through right now, that we don't forget about all these important topics, and let's not lose sight of the progress that's been made, but certainly there's more to be done. So with that, everybody have a great evening, and thanks for your time. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
All right. Thank you all. Your stream is stopped.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I,
Yeah.
Great job, Adam. Great
Thank you.
job. Thank you.
Yeah.
You
Absolutely.
as well.
Thank you.
You as well.
And we had a
Great
ton
job.
of
Great job,
positive
Adam.
stuff coming through,
Who's that?
Adam,
It's awesome.
just so you know.
Yeah, I wasn't able to see the chat. I'm just on the Zoom call, so I wasn't.
Yeah,
able to see it.
I wasn't able to see it either, but I'm getting messages texted to me, so
Awesome.
it's all positive.
All right, that's
All right.
awesome.
Good night.
Good night.
All right.